This video has one purpose, and I'm going to state it in the first 10 seconds. Instead of making you wait for it, I'm going to show you exactly how to use your imagination to get the specific thing you want. Not a mood, not a vibe. A technique, the same one Neville Goddard taught from a stage in New York for almost 30 years, and the same one that quietly changed the lives of people who had no reason to believe it would. Here's the claim that's going to sound strange the first time you hear it, so I'll just say it straight. The power that religion has been calling God for thousands of years is not somewhere outside of you. It's your own imagination, not imagination as in make-believe. Imagination as in the actual creative force that's been shaping your life this entire time, whether you were pointing it on purpose or not. Nothing about your circumstances is as fixed as it looks. Everything you call reality is more like wet clay than stone. It holds whatever shape the deepest, most repeated pressure of your own mind has been pressing into it. Now, I already know what some of you are doing right now, and I want to name it before you do it anymore, because Neville used to run into this constantly. Somebody would sit in his audience nodding along, and the whole time, one hand would be resting on the arm of the chair, and every few seconds, the fingers would press into it, just to stay anchored, just to keep one foot in the real world, while listening to something that felt too good to be tested. If that's you right now, half listening, half bracing yourself not to fall for something, that's fine. Keep your hand on the chair, but watch what happened to the people who let go of it. There's a story Neville told often enough that it's become one of the most repeated in his whole body of work. And I want to tell it to you the way he told it, because the details are the entire point. A 17-year-old girl riding a streetcar home on Christmas Eve. It's raining. The car is loud, full of other young people heading home for the holidays, laughing, loud with each other. She's sitting near the window, and she is not laughing. Earlier that year, her father had died in an accident, and she's on her way back to a house that's going to feel unbearably empty in about 20 minutes. She has no training, no career, just a waitressing job to get by, and she can't hold the tears back anymore. So, out of what almost sounds like practical embarrassment more than anything spiritual, she turns her face up toward the window and lets the rain on the glass cover for the tears on her cheeks. And then, holding onto the rail of the streetcar, she does something that, if you didn't know what came next, would sound like a girl quietly losing her grip on reality. She tells herself, this isn't rain, this is ocean spray. This isn't the salt of my own tears. This is the salt of sea wind. This isn't a streetcar. This is the deck of a ship. And I am sailing into a harbor I've always wanted to see. She doesn't just think it. She lets herself feel it. The motion, the salt air, the arrival. And then the streetcar reaches her stop, and she gets off, and life goes on. 10 days later, a letter arrives from a law firm in Chicago. Years earlier, before sailing for Europe, an aunt of hers had left $3,000 with instructions. If she didn't return, the money would go to her niece. The aunt had just died. The money was hers. 1 month later, that 17-year-old girl is on an actual ship, sailing into an actual harbor, and it's night, and there's spray in the air, and, she said afterward, she felt exactly what she had felt a month before on that streetcar. Except this time, it wasn't imagined. It was arriving. I'm not telling you that story to give you chills. I'm telling you because embedded inside it is the entire technique this video is going to teach you. Here's what she actually did. Stripped of the poetry, she took a feeling she wanted, the specific physical feeling of being somewhere she wasn't, and instead of just wishing for it from a distance, she stepped inside it with her senses: salt, wind, motion. She gave her imagination something to feel, not just something to think about. And she held that feeling until the streetcar ride ended, not trying to figure out how it would happen. That's the whole method. Everything else in this video is just detail on top of that one move. Here's how you actually do this, tonight, with whatever you want. First, know exactly what you want, not vaguely, exactly. Vague desires produce vague results because there's nothing specific enough for your imagination to grip onto. Second, build a small, physical, sensory scene that would only make sense if you already had it. Not a general feeling of success, a specific moment. What would you be touching? What would you be looking at? What would you physically be doing? Third, at night, step into that scene from the inside, not watching it like a movie, feeling it like a memory that happens to be about to happen. There's a specific mental state where this actually works, and almost nobody explains it properly. So let's slow down on exactly that for a second. A lot of men watching this are going to try it tonight and hit the same wall. You lie down, you try to feel the scene, and you're too wide awake for it to feel like anything but effort. The state you're after isn't meditation, and it isn't just trying harder to visualize. It's the loose, heavy-eyed window that happens naturally every night, usually right when you'd normally let your phone slip out of your hand. You can find it on purpose. Lie down, let your body go heavier than usual, stop trying to hold a sharp picture, and let the scene get a little blurry and dreamlike around the edges. That blurriness is not you doing it wrong. That's the sign you're in the right state. A sharp, effortful, wide-awake image is actually the wrong target. A soft, half-formed felt impression right at the edge of sleep is what actually takes hold. Before we go further, I want to pause and answer the question a good portion of you are already asking silently. Why would feeling a scene actually change anything outside your own head? Here's the honest, unmystical version. Every one of us already lives with a subconscious mind that's been trained, mostly by accident, through thousands of repeated feelings, most of them never chosen on purpose. Every time you've replayed an embarrassing moment, every time you've rehearsed an argument you never had, you were doing this exact technique in reverse, training your subconscious toward a state you didn't want. Neville's whole method isn't introducing some exotic new power into your life. It's pointing an existing, already proven mechanism at a target you actually chose. Your subconscious doesn't check facts. It doesn't hold a debate about probability. It responds to what feels rehearsed, familiar, and true. The same way a muscle doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a vivid nightmare, and still floods you with adrenaline either way. That's not weakness in the system. That's the exact feature this technique is built to use. Once a felt scene has been rehearsed enough times that it stops feeling invented and starts feeling familiar, your subconscious starts producing the small, unconscious behavioral shifts that make the outer version of that scene more likely. The extra ounce of confidence in a negotiation, the willingness to speak up in a meeting, the decision to apply for something you'd have talked yourself out of a month earlier. None of that requires believing in magic. It just requires understanding that the mind you've been unconsciously training your whole life can also be trained on purpose. Let's make this practical across a few different situations, because I don't know exactly what you're picturing right now. And Neville always covered a few different desires side by side, so everyone in the room had something to hold on to. Say what you want is a home you can't currently afford. You'd build, in your imagination, the exact walk from room to room, the floor under your feet, the door handle, the specific chair by the window, and at night you'd mentally walk that route before falling asleep, touching what you'd touch, standing where you'd stand. Say it's a promotion. You'd ask yourself, what would actually be different the day after? Who would shake my hand? What would they say? What would I say back? And you'd feel that exchange specifically instead of just thinking the word success at the ceiling. Say it's a relationship. You're looking for the person or trying to repair the one you have. Neville used to point to something almost embarrassingly simple. A woman wanting to be married would, in her imagination, actually feel a ring on her finger, not picture it from a distance. Feel the weight of it, turn it slightly with her thumb, the way you'd absent-mindedly touch a ring you actually wore. Small, physical, specific. That's the pattern every single time. The size of the desire doesn't matter. The physical specificity of the felt scene does. Or say you're the guy thinking about leaving a stable job to start something of your own, and every practical voice around you is telling you to wait. You wouldn't sit there imagining an abstract future of success. You'd imagine one specific Tuesday morning, opening your laptop at your own desk, seeing the first payment come in, the exact feeling in your chest that isn't anxiety anymore. It's just quiet competence. That one scene, held nightly, does more work than 100 hours of anxious planning, because planning happens in the analytical mind, and this technique works underneath it, in the part of you that actually governs habit and instinct. Now, Neville used to point out something that surprised a lot of people in his audience, especially the ones who came from a religious background and were nervous this all sounded a little too new age for their taste. He'd say, "This isn't new. This is one of the oldest instructions in Scripture, just misread as history for centuries. There's a line in the Gospel of John about a father's house having many rooms prepared and a promise of being brought into one of them. Neville's reading was that this was never about a location after death. It was a description of the exact mental act we just walked through. Build a vivid felt representation of the state you want, enter it, and stay there until it becomes home. Translate the old religious language into plain modern terms, and it's not mystical at all. It's a set of operating instructions that got mistaken for a story about someplace else, someday else. Neville didn't just teach this from a stage. He said more than once that he learned it the same way anyone learns anything difficult to believe, by testing it on something he actually wanted, with nothing to lose. In 1933, broke, living in New York, he wanted more than anything to travel to Barbados to see his family, and had no way to pay for the trip. An older man who'd been teaching him this method told him something simple. Tonight, as you fall asleep, don't imagine going to Barbados. Imagine you're already there, specifically in your father's house, in your own bed, in that room. Fall asleep inside that assumption, not chasing toward it. He did that nightly, for about a month. Nothing seemed to move for weeks. And then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived from his own family, inviting him to spend the winter in Barbados. He sailed that December. And here's the part Neville was honest enough to admit, and I think it's the most useful part of the whole story. Almost immediately afterward, some part of his mind tried to talk him out of what had just happened. It would have happened anyway, that voice says. Coincidence. You're reading meaning into a normal event. He said that voice shows up almost every time, right on schedule, and that the trick isn't to argue with it. It's to notice that it always arrives right after the method works, never before. That's not proof it's wrong. That's just what a mind does when it's been trained its whole life to assume the ordinary explanation by default. Now here's a second tool, because falling asleep in a scene is powerful, but it's not the only move available to you. And Neville taught this one as a daily practice, not just a nightly one. It's called revision. At the end of each day, instead of just letting the day's events sit there as final, the argument, the rejection, the bad news, you mentally rewrite them. Not fantasy for its own sake, a deliberate, specific revision of exactly what you wish had happened instead, replayed with enough detail that it starts to feel like the more accurate memory of the two. Here's a case that shows exactly how far this can go. A woman had been estranged from her daughter-in-law for 2 years, cut off, no correspondence, gifts sent to her grandson that were never once acknowledged. After learning the revision technique, she started doing something specific every night. She'd mentally composed 2 letters, one from her grandson, one from her daughter-in-law, each one warm, each one asking why she hadn't visited. She'd hold the imagined letter in her hands, read it, let herself feel the relief of reconciliation. She did this for 7 nights in a row. On the 8th day, an actual letter arrived from her daughter-in-law. Inside it were 2 letters, one from the grandson, one from the daughter-in-law, and they nearly matched, almost word for word, what she had been imagining reading for a week. This same principle, Neville said, applies to almost anything you can picture with enough specificity, including your own body. If you were dealing with an injury, the method isn't to sit and worry about the injury. It's to construct, in detail, the scene of yourself already moving normally, doing the specific things you'd be doing if it were healed, and replay that scene with enough repetition that it starts to carry the emotional weight of memory instead of hope. A few ways men in particular tend to get this wrong, worth naming before you try it yourself. The first is turning it into another task on the to-do list, doing it fast, mechanically, at 40% attention, the way you'd knock out an email before bed. The feeling is the entire mechanism. Without it, you're just narrating a story to yourself, and narration alone doesn't move anything. The second is picking a scene so big it doesn't feel believable even to you. The entire rest of your life transformed overnight. Your own mind will reject that as fantasy before it has a chance to take hold as familiar. Small, specific, physically groundable scenes get accepted. Sweeping ones get filed under daydream and discarded by morning. The third is spending the whole next day checking whether it worked. That single habit, scanning for proof, refreshing an inbox, watching for signs, undoes more of this technique than almost anything else, because it reasserts the exact state of lack you were trying to leave behind. Do the work at night. Let the day be the day. Check nothing. The fourth is quitting after 2 or 3 nights because nothing visible happened yet. Neville was consistent on this point across decades of lectures. The outer world runs on a delay, and the length of that delay has nothing to do with whether the method is working. It only means it hasn't reached the surface yet. Let's put the whole thing back together in one place, because this much teaching is easy to walk away from with only the story and none of the mechanics. 1. Know exactly what you want, specifically enough that you could describe the exact moment it becomes real. 2. Build a small, physical, sensory scene around that moment, something you touch, hear, or see, not a vague feeling of success. 3. Enter that scene at night, in the loose, drowsy state right before sleep from the inside, as something happening to you rather than something you're narrating. 4. During the day, when revision applies, rewrite the moments that went wrong, instead of carrying them forward unedited. 5. Expect a delay you can't predict or schedule. And don't let the absence of visible proof in week 1 talk you out of week 3. That's the entire discipline Neville spent almost 30 years teaching from a single stage, dressed up in 100 different stories, but always the same 5 moves underneath. There's a line from William Blake that Neville liked to end on, and I'll leave you with it too. In your own bosom, you bear your heaven. Not somewhere else, not someday. Right now, in whatever you're picturing with enough detail to feel it. So here's what I want you to actually do tonight. Not think about, do. Pick one thing. Build one specific scene around it. And before you fall asleep, step inside it the way that 17-year-old girl stepped onto the deck of a ship that hadn't arrived yet. Tell me in the comments what scene you chose, and if you want to go deeper into exactly how long to hold that state before it hardens into fact, as Neville put it, that's the next video.